Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this very interesting and what I hope will be insightful webinar for everyone to join us. I couldn't get a topic that is more important to the current times, and we greatly appreciate you being here and your quest for more and additional knowledge about some of the products and technology and education that you can provide to your customers as well. My name is Deb Levy, and I'm the publisher of US Glass Magazine. US Glass Metal and Glazing Magazine is actually the largest of the publications for the architectural glass and metal industry in the world. And we produce US Glass along with a number of other titles, including the Architect's Guide to Glass. So I am very pleased to be with you today and to be hosting this small but powerful group of our insightful panelists. And if we can go to them, that would be great. First up, I would like to introduce Charlie Rizzo. Charlie is the president of Skyline Design, based out of Chicago. And Skyline Design is known within the architectural glass industry as being a very innovative company. So it's going to be a real delight to work with Charlie this day. I know you're all in different places, so I don't want to say a ton. Charlie, could we just take a second for you to tell us a little bit about yourself and what Skyline does?
Sure. Skyline Design is a decorative glass company, and we decorate glass and we fabricate glass. We started in 1983. I was taught the craft by a second generation Brit who came over from England to work in the World's Fair. His family did all of the decorative glass for Daniel Burnham. I ran into him one day, asked him if I could possibly learn the craft, and he was gracious enough to allow me to spend time in the studio. And we started doing everything by hand. Today we're 100% almost mechanized, and so there's been a lot of great changes, and it's very exciting to see what is going on in the glass industry today. And hopefully we can kind of share a little bit more about how we do things and why we're doing things today in the way we're doing them, especially in the healthcare field. So that's sort of the focus, I think, in many ways of the conversation today. So.
Well, that's great. It sounds like you started out more working with glass as an art and a craftsman and moved it forward into building materials and technology, which is always kind of neat to see.
Yeah, I would say that's true, certainly, because we found that stretching the limitations of process is something, because we all come from an art background. I think the idea is that there were obstacles. We just kind of tried to leap over those obstacles and figure out another way around a lot of the challenges. And consequently, I think through the creative process came up with a lot of great innovative ways to approach glass in new and different techniques.
Well, we're very pleased to have you, Charlie, and thank you for your forward thinking and putting this together as well. I'm also pleased to introduce to you Rosalyn Cama. Rosalyn is president of Cama Inc., which is I would say, healthcare design consulting firm, and you're based in Boston. Do I have that right, Rosalyn?
New Haven, Connecticut, that other Ivy city.
Close but no cigar. Well, welcome, Rosalyn. Will you tell us a bit about some of what you've done in all your years?
Yeah, no, so Charlie, it's funny, I hadn't thought of it this way, but, on your way to doing one thing, you end up doing something else. I went to college to be a fine arts major and came out an interior design major. For those of you just graduating, I feel for you. I graduated in the middle of a recession, cobbled together some jobs, and then realized I needed to go back to graduate school. So in that interim, landed at a hospital, and that set my course. I never went to graduate school. I stayed on board at Yale New Haven, learned to build a hospital building, and then ironically, in the same year that Skyline Design started, Cama Inc. started in 1983, we launched an interior design firm, and you specialize in where your leads come from. And so I became a healthcare designer, whether I liked it or not. But quickly found that it was amazingly challenging because it's continually advancing. There are continuous facility improvements from small renovations to much larger replacement facilities. And in the process, got involved with my professional organization, ASID, became a national leader and volunteer, which led me to the Center for Health Design, which sort of cemented this concept of research-based design. So very early on, I learned to be accountable, not only to a client, but to the client's customer, and in this case, a life or death outcome. Began to understand the importance of design decisions. So our studio grew, we started partnering with large architectural firms, which gave us extension to our knowledge. And then because of our connection to research, I was asked, John Zarnicki, who now is at IIDA, but then was an editor at Wiley, asked me to write a book about the evidence-based methodology. So in 2009, published a how-to manual for studios to grow into this lab consulting work. And it was in that consulting work that we began to dig deeper into why these projects were coming on board. It wasn't just because there was additional space needed or a new methodology of delivering care or a new modality for diagnosing or treating. And so we began to be quite analytical in the work we did. But, you know, we went through this wonderful period in the early 2000s where we influenced, through, ironically, the spread of infection. We legislated the single-bedded room. And there was some time, there was a lot of building going on, but as the decades now, 2 decades have gone by, we sort of rest on those laurels. And many of our projects have speed to delivery and cost considerations that the ability to innovate now or think deeply about these outcomes has really been crimped. Even if we come in early as, you know, consultants and health design teams think differently. So what I discovered, goodness, probably about 6 or 8 years ago now, is that I had enough of a voice in the industry that I could ask the hard questions. And the way I realized to get answers for the industry was not to do it project by project, but to find the Charlie Rizzos of the world and look at the kit of parts and see if we could solve the problems. And in a bit of insecurity, and for those of you who've sat through now 6 of the CEUs that we've given, we asked the question about how glass could contribute pre-COVID to a better quality of experience in the healthcare environment. And so by working with manufacturers, we were given the time to do the investigation into the research that others had done, find things that we weren't looking for in addition, which led us to the base of the presentation, the 4 considerations. And then ultimately to work with these manufacturers, and they're just brilliant in developing product, industrial design. And, you know, Charlie and I now are into this for 4 years in thinking how best to create a better privacy screen in the care environment. And so the journey has been one of evolution, you know, timing is everything, exploration, knowing how to ask the right questions, and partnering and finding, you know, the right partner to bring solution to the audience before us, who really, you are the catalyst for the change. You'll take this product and you will make the change that we just dreamed about 4 years ago. That's what we do. We're troublemakers.
Well, troublemakers, sometimes the disruptors are the total innovators in moving industry forward. So that's great. Thank you, Roz. I'd also just like to mention the other person that you see on the panelists bar up there, who is Chase Pinelli. Chase is our behind the scenes producer of the webinar, and I'm sure he doesn't want to be called out, but we're going to do it anyway, just so that we get to thank him and also let you all know who he is. So you will see Chase if something goes wrong. We'll go from there. So let's get started with our discussion. I think this is a really interesting and telling photo that's on the screen right now. because when we were kind of chatting before we started, you made the mention, Roz, that this was almost a generation, or even though it's a few years old, a lifetime ago technology. So do you want to give us a little bit of background on what this is and how it's changed and how that relates to our topic?
Sure. So the real story is that I was at Health Design. Many of you know me as Chair Emeritus of the Board of the Center for Health Design. And in 2014 or 15, I'm sorry, 2016, we launched a chair that did not exist with another manufacturer, IOA, that had height adjustability and comfort for a family member to sit next to their loved ones in bed. It was based on the healing power of touch, which is sort of an irony right now, but it is about compassionate care and a lot of the neuroscience wrapped around who we are as human beings. We won, we took away top of the show, best award. This was my, Cinderella story of not being in industrial design, but to be able to launch a product that resonated with an audience. Sessions were in and the exhibit hall was quiet. And so I thought I'd walk around and see, because we were just been bogged down in the chair booth, and I was walking around and this man's like, I could feel, when someone's following you, you can feel them. I turned around and it's Charlie Rizzo, and he goes, he said, I think we should be working together. I want a Cama product. What can we do? And so I said, well, it didn't take too long to think about it. I said, I have a silly idea and maybe we can do this together. And so I suggested that we do what we can to replace the cubicle curtain. And so we embedded in the Skyline team, and my team went into the research to build our hypothesis to prove that we weren't going down a crazy path, because this was pretty a remarkable idea. And then Charlie and I worked in earnest to find not only just how a concept could come to pass, but to develop a product line. So Dignity Glass was born as a door system, and camouflage became the patterning that allowed us to create that yin and yang between patient privacy and dignity and nursing visibility and safety. So it was a challenge, an acceptance of the challenge, and then a lot of hard work. And then we came back 2 years ago and we won the Nightingale Award for this category. So it's about a process, but it's about, what I tell a lot of people in healthcare design, it's about having the right question in place. And the question was how to create a better care environment, providing dignity for patients. You're muted, Deb. There you go.
Good point. Charlie, I know that you are heavily involved with Dignity Glass and with all of the other things that developed from the relationship with Roz. Can you give us a little bit of background on that? Charlie?
Looks like his screen is frozen.
Getting a little bit of movement now. I think one of the challenges is that everyone is using a lot of these video conferencing systems and webinars right now, so that makes it difficult to get everybody.
Well, okay, great. Yeah. So when typically what we do is when we work with a creative person such as Roz.
Excuse me, Charlie, turn your video off. I think your audio will get stronger if you just turn your video off right now. Now speak.
But you're on mute.
No, he's not on mute.
No, oh, that's Chaz. That's right. Sorry.
Okay.
Well, I can, well, he sort of figures that out, Chase,
Sure,
whenever she
thank you,
takes
Roz.
how to
Appreciate
do
that.
that. I
Very
think
good.
from, all right, our apologies to the audience, but I think, for those of you who are wondering how manufacturing and design come together, I mean, you have to have a demand or an absence, as I said, an unmet need in the marketplace, and then the ability to test the market. I mean, the sweet story behind what we did was we piqued a lot of interest as we began to unfold this concept. We started talking to architectural and design firms and providers, and everyone started to scratch their head and went, what? Get rid of cubicle curtains? How do you get rid of cubicle curtains? They're everywhere. And then as we started to push and pull on it, it became obvious that there is a need. And so we were able to use industry influence. And then simultaneously, I think it was NeoCon last year, Kaiser showed up and said, gee, we're asking this question. Where's your research? They hadn't done theirs yet. We shared our knowledge. I mean, for a competitive business model, one wouldn't share research and development, but we freely shared it. And Kaiser came along and said, we concur, and shared their knowledge. And so unbeknownst to us, a pandemic was rolling down. And the pandemic is all about air and contact spread of infection. And what better material to begin for all of these considerations that you see on the screen right now. I mean, starting with harm, we were starting to build a business case on C. difficile and MRSA and Candida auris, which was a fungal infection, and rampant throughout hospitals. And people go into hospitals and do not have these infections till they arrive. Well, Corona comes along and it's quite the opposite. People come in with it, staff doesn't have it. And what do you do to stop that insipid spread? And so we have lots of information that others should be tapping into. There's no question. And then, dignity and privacy, just watch the local news at night. And glass was being shown very early on. We had a slide where a patient was writing on their door. That was how they communicated, because staff didn't have all the protective material. Glass became the protective material. And then from a visibility point of view, that's what, touch was important, but clad with gloves. Many, caregivers used an iPhone to do the farewell via FaceTime, but, one could argue that window into family was through a piece of glass, so, glass became an instrument for the way much of this care was given. And then our theory on beauty is about survival. And there is no greater conversation to be had right now in the COVID world about survival. And for those of you in your environments where you're living and quarantining, it's the window to outdoors that makes life manageable. And I'll bet there's a piece of glass between you and nature if you haven't gone outside yet. So, it's just, the timing is everything. Charlie, can you now join us in conversation?
I think I'm on. I'm not sure. Am I on?
Perfect.
We're on.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So getting back to my relationship with Roz, we met at healthcare many years ago. I think we had worked on some projects with her. We'd been doing work in the healthcare field for a number of years and participated in a healthcare design show, I think since the onset. So we have historically worked with people like Alexander Gerard, Suzanne Tick, Patricia Uricchiola, and a lot of other really prominent designers. And in the healthcare field, we felt it would be a great opportunity to work with Roz. And so I approached her, we created a relationship, and then we had to figure out, well, what exactly do we do that's different and unusual? So, that was a challenge for Roz. And Roz started thinking about it. It took a good 3 or 4 months to get a grip on exactly how she wanted to approach it. And then all these other takeaways that you're seeing on the screen began to develop, and with acoustical qualities and the maintenance issues and the, the HAI resistant surfaces, and glass, as we look around today, it's ubiquitous. It's in so many different places in our world, and it's such an important material, and it naturally fits into the healthcare environments. Glass is made strictly from about 98% sand, a little soda ash, a little borax, a little lime, and under 2200 degrees, you end up with this beautiful product. So it's a very natural material. And so in the healthcare setting, we've been able to take some of these wonderful patterns that Roz has created and some of the other design teams that we've worked with and apply them in all sorts of situations, in ICU, in patient treatment areas. Right now we're moving a lot into patient rooms, and we had to then step up to the challenge of, well, how do we really offer this to the healthcare community in a different way? Typically we're spec'd and we're more or less in the public space, and now we're moving more into actually into the patient room. And Roz saw the need with the problems with the cubicle curtain, as she spoke of earlier. And so we've come up with a door system that works in remodels and in new construction, where we can offer the hardware and the glass as a finished solution. So I think for us, that was a big step forward. And we're working with a lot of different healthcare organizations now, starting to provide these different new products to them. So we're quite excited about where it's going, and hopefully everyone will start using more glass. I mean, we do use a lot of glass in healthcare already. I mean, there's no question about it. It's in every entryway. Of course, it's on the exteriors. So we know all the properties of natural light-giving qualities, et cetera. So now that we're adding design to it, we're getting this biophilic kind of experience happening where, and I think Roz spoke about it quite a bit in her CEU, where people, you don't necessarily have to see the three-dimensional beauty of nature, but if there's a representation, it almost has the same effect on someone. So a lot of the things that Roz has done and some of the things that we're doing are really taking those ideas and then putting them on glass, so you get the experience for the healthcare provider and for the patient both. So it's a double win. So
I also think, I sort of teased this out of the audience, is this idea that, change occurs when need is greater than fear. And right now, need is greater than the fear of change. And so this opportunity to look at how to reconfigure our care environments, both acute, ambulatory, one can now consider retail and at-home care, has plenty of possibilities. And if we can begin to add glass to our kit of parts, what opportunities do we have that we hadn't had in the past? That's what makes innovation so hard, because this industry is tied into codes and guidelines, and everyone's scrambling. I've had 2 clients this morning start to ask questions. Both have shovels in the ground, and they're like, well, wait a minute, the rules are changing. What are our spaces going to look like? How are we going to create not large areas of assembly, but smaller areas of assembly? I think it's an opportunity. Our nursing units, we haven't changed them for over 20 years now. That single bedded room is a 1999 idea to stop the spread of MRSA. What's the COVID version of it? And so to those of you who are on planning and using an evidence-based methodology, let's ask the question about how to get to the next level of care. and in that toolbox and how we create those next best solutions. When you build a building, it's got to last for 40 years, right? So, you know, we're going out to 2060. What's going to happen between now and then? And if you used, you know, glass is just a new tool in your toolkit, could you come up with ideas that you otherwise wouldn't have?
Well, and one of the things that I've been so in awe of in all my years involved in the glass industry is its versatility and how the manufacturers respond to every need. When energy efficiency was needed, they created it. When acoustical,
Right.
better acoustics were needed, they created that. And now we're going to be in a situation where even more consciousness around health and prevention is needed, and they will respond without a doubt.
Yeah.
Have you seen some of that in your projects, recent projects that you're doing? Have you seen the influence of some of the newer COVID issues yet come to rise?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, we're 8 weeks into this, so it's kind of hard, but as I said, 2 clients today did ask, but I will say that, you know, we're doing a large replacement hospital up in New York State in Utica, and they put the gauntlet down and said, we don't want cubicle curtains. What can you do for us? Little did they know they asked the right person. I had spent a number of years already thinking about it, and so already in the spec is our ability to add the dignity concept and create with the architects, you know, a wonderful decentralized nursing station that puts the nurses as close to the bedside as possible in the old model of care, right? And so how will that model change right now is yet to be determined. AIA just came out with a set of guidelines. And so I just saw those published yesterday. I mean, there's a lot that's happening, a lot that's going, but it's not necessarily going to be the usual suspects who will make this change. I think, you know, I mean, for me, the aha moment is the ability in the makers world, right? To work with the Charlies, you know, for us, the Fabio Del Mestris at IOA and, you know, others who can roll up our shirt sleeves and quickly get to change. You know, the larger institutions and typical manufacturers, I mean, it's like watching how fast we can break the rules now to get vaccinations out faster, get testing out faster. It's the small think tanks that are really pushing those, you know, probably linked to the larger manufacturers to hit supply and demand, but the ability to sit with Charlie and say, it's a crazy idea, you willing to take a chance? And we invested, you know, a lot of both our company's time to get here, and we're going to make it as easy as we can for you all to make that leap, because at the end of the day, it's about that Hippocratic oath to do no harm, and we're all touched by what's happening right now. So so yeah, I think every hospital administrator is going to scratch their head a little and say, what will I do differently? How will I turn my big ship? And hopefully we can come to the table with some of those answers, because we've been thinking about it just coincidentally.
Good point. I was going to put in a question here that came from one of our webinar participants today that I thought would be appropriate at this time, who was mentioning that you had mentioned yesterday that glass partitions that have vinyl panel partitions might hold bacteria. And so the question was, what would you recommend as a pattern on the glass instead? Would it be a frick glass or pattern glass or perhaps film?
So yeah, I'll let Charlie answer that, because we've done, I mean, there's so many properties of glass that allow us to bring our yin yang visibility, non-visibility patterns together. But Charlie, you want to speak more technically? And let me just say before Charlie does that, that there are plenty of organizations looking at COVID, which is viral. Others have looked at MRSA, which is bacterial, and fungal infections, and their lifespan on a variety of different surfaces. That came out quite in earnest at the beginning of this COVID discussion. I haven't seen as much of it, but glass, by virtue of its properties, is able to be cleaned easily. Life cycle on the virus is a little bit shorter than on plastics, but it does have a life on the surface. So it's insipid, and we've got, the trick is in the ease of cleaning. So Charlie, talk about the properties of putting pattern into glass.
Well, certainly, we have been doing glass in healthcare environments for many years, and we also used to do more resin-based products, which we decided to give up on for a number of reasons. But anyway, glass today, in the processes that we use in healthcare, are both in the lamination process, where we laminate two pieces of glass together, and in the inner layer, we can put an acoustical value film, and then we can also decorate that film. And so a lot of the things that we're doing with Roz and others are decorating the laminated inner layer, so you can literally spray both sides of the glass with any kind of cleaning product. And especially today, with all the changing methodology that we're seeing every day that are coming to being in the healthcare situation environment, we feel really good about the types of laminations we're using. We're using an EVA, which is a waterproof material that you won't get the bleeding that some laminations do if they're PVB. And we're also doing fritted, which is a baked on high temperature process where we're taking printing and then putting it through a tempering oven, and then literally fusing the patterns into the glass. So depending on the application, because we're so diverse, we can do several different techniques, and we really look at each job individually and where it's going to decide how we want the final application to be. So a lot of it has to do with working designers, working with facilities. We've been out talking to facility leadership about best use and best practice with glass. Certainly one of the things that we found when we were looking at Dignity glass with Roz and camouflage was the fact that, the acoustical value, we know that in a patient room setting, I think Roz and her CEU said that when typically the noise volume in that room is like a hairdryer going 24/7. So, the idea of closing a door, we know that quiet helps healing. So if you can allow a patient to have quiet, then they can heal quicker. My father-in-law was just in the hospital, I don't know, about a month and a half ago, right before COVID-19 struck. And, he'd been in there 3 days and said he didn't sleep for 1 day because the door was open all the time. So the idea, you can close the door, the nurse can see in, or the caregiver can see into the room. And that's really what Roz's whole theory was behind this, was allowing that dignity and privacy to really show itself. And I think she found that glass really answered all those questions. And the other thing I want to talk about quickly is the when they're designing healthcare facilities, they're not looking for a 5-year ROI. They're looking for a 15 or a 20-year ROI. When you put glass in, that glass will stay there for 20, 30 years. Nothing is going to happen to that glass. So as you can see in buildings all around us that have been there since the turn of the century, et cetera, glass is such a stable material, although it is a liquid in a suspended state, as some of us know, which is a fascinating concept. But the idea that glass will be a permanent solution, I think, is what really spoke to Kaiser when they did their analysis in their white paper. And turned out glass, when it compared to cubicle curtains, and we were really specifically talking about a patient room only, that the value benefit on 15 and 20 years exceeded cubicle curtain, disposable, and changeable. And so then we can get into the environmental aspects of all of this, and like how much landfill is disposable curtains create. The medical industry itself is a huge creator of landfills. So, you know, the environmentals, which I haven't really even began to address yet, really speaks loudly to it. So every aspect of glass, I think, really fits into the environmental story that we're all trying to consider and constantly think about, and then a solution for the infectious disease control, where there's a non-porous material that you can spray anything up to bleach or hydrogen peroxide, non-diluted, and you can just clean it. And psychologically, I think everyone understands that. Like, you know, you can go up to glass and spray it and wipe it down, and it's going to be clean.
You know, it's so funny, Charlie, because my mom was in the hospital probably about the same time as your father-in-law, and she was in one of those old-fashioned two-people rooms this time.
Old-fashioned. That's
They still exist.
And in the course of her stay there, she was in there about 3.5 weeks. She had 3 different roommates. And every time a new roommate came in, you know, they would come in and really scour down that half of the room. But that partition curtain was never touched, you know, nothing was ever done with it. And you have
Roz could speak to that.
There. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, the time is right for this conversation. But, you know, the other piece of this is that, you know, healthcare is moving into other environments as well. And so how we begin to use this material in the transitioning, I mean, I see lots of applications, but, you know, in the work environment, it's about health and well-being. And so how will we cohort smaller groups of people when we've slathered open floor plans with just bench type work environments? You know, where will people isolate when one family member is not well? You know, I was on a call with residential living for the elderly earlier. And, you know, right now they're just locking the residents in their rooms, but they've got to be able to come into communal areas. And so how can you be alone and together? You know, similarly with hospitality, I mean, and that restaurants, I mean, those industries are really going to be about stopping the spread of contact and airborne infection, but yet not losing capacity. And it's going to be a very clever design. And I can't imagine that transparency and translucency isn't going to play a role in successful design. And so therefore glass is going to need to be in those kit parts.
Right. Well, and as you know, there's been a whole body of research around daylighting and the health of employees and workspaces. And most recently, there's been a lot of research around the use of glass in schools, because after some of the school shootings, there's been a move toward having less glass. And time again, the studies come out and show how important that is for the health and well-being of students. So you'd have to extrapolate, and I'm sure you have surveys in the same areas of healthcare on the same thing.
Yeah, you know, a lot of the evidence-based research, I mean, if you're not an evidence-based designer, you need to just, you know, find time to read or hire someone on your staff who can really be part of your knowledge base. I call it a group brain, but there's tons of evidence around who we are as a species. I mean, you know, COVID sort of has brought us back to the reality that we are expendable. The Earth will continue on, but as a species, we could be annihilated by something we can't even see. But to survive, we need sustenance. And in our sustenance is light. And it sets our circadian rhythm. It helps create a rhythm in our brains as to how we operate, how we replenish, how we are awake, how we learn, how we sleep, how we rest, you know, how we heal. And so there are plenty of studies across the board. And I'm sure I'm not as well versed in educational spaces or hospitality spaces, but goodness knows we are like a moth to flame. We are drawn to light. And so the way to do that, especially in the floor plates that we have, if we're going to have to sub-partition off these spaces, it's not going to be a gyp wall solution. So I challenge the audience to think less about the words and the metrics that will be put around how many people at what distance, and think about the human condition and what it is we need for health and wellness that lead to our well-being. And it's there that this application will earn its return on investment.
That's a good point. Let me turn the tables a little bit here for a second, and let's talk, because we've talked about so many of the great applications and usages of glass. I just want to ask, are there any limitations that you see, or any in terms of issues with fabrication or use of glass in the healthcare setting?
Okay.
So from a design point of view, it's space, right? The cubicle curtain allows the code to give you a little bit of flexibility. There are code compliance about areas around patients for the need for a code team to come in and equipment to come in. And so the curtains will give you a little flexibility because they give. So any, like a double bedded room that you mentioned, you can put 2 people in less square footage than you would 2 single rooms. If you've been in an emergency room, the bays that are different than the rooms with doors have a little bit, require less space by code. Similarly with post anesthesia care, or areas where nurses are keeping an eye on multiple patients. So those have to be rethought out, but those are planning, those are architectural planning and programming issues, and they can be done. I think, you know, as I said earlier, the time is right to rethink some of the ways we organize these spaces. And, you know, glass may or may not play a role, but I think it probably will. But it does have rigidity to it, so you can't push it aside. You can slide it,
Right.
but you can't, you know, push into it.
Charlie, your thoughts?
My thoughts are certainly glass, you know, because of the structural integrity of glass, it can be probably used in any area to divide areas off with little or very little hardware necessary. Glass is a very monolithic material. You don't need a lot of other support structures like resins and more unstable plastics, where you need significant amount of hardware. And I think from a cost factor, the idea that you know, you're really buying glass per square foot, you're maximizing use. You don't pay for what you don't use, unlike some other plastic products where you're buying full sheets of glass or plastic, and then you have to cut it down. So your yield costs go way up. So if you're paying, let's just use $25 a square foot for a highly decorative piece of glass and a piece of plastic, you're going to buy one piece of glass that will be to size, and you're paying the $25. When you buy these plastics, they're generally in 4x8 or 5x10 sheets. If you only need 4x8, then you have a waste factor of 20%, let's say. And so in terms of, because everyone's looking at cost today, no matter how wonderful materials are, they have to look at cost, and they have to look at everything. So they have to look at the ROI, what's the return on investment, how much structure do I need, how much, you know, what is the full yield going to be of the product, how is it maintained? So there's lots of things to look at, and glass, as opposed to drywall and other materials, certainly drywall is much less expensive. However, you know, you have a lot more maintenance on that. So you know, we're doing wall cladding with glass all over the place now, not only in healthcare settings, but in many corporate settings, where we're cladding entire elevator lobbies. So they know they can go in and spray down and clean any of the surfaces easily. It always looks beautiful. That's the wonderful thing about glass. You spray a little Windex on it, and it looks wonderful. So it's easy for maintenance. It has all the structural integrity that you need, and it beautifies an environment. So I think there's just so many uses for glass, and not only in a healthcare setting. We do a lot of MOBs, which are the offices of hospitals. We do a lot of medical centers, and You know, office fronts, lots of office fronts. I see that coming back, and looking on. I've been sitting in on a lot of webinars and seeing a lot of discussion about how the new office is going to look like. Right? Everybody needs to know, where am I going to go when I go back to work? And you know, they're dividing, they're breaking up the benching. They're creating more. What are they using? They're using typically glass or maybe bleach resistant fabrics and vertical applications. And so there are lots of ways to start to begin to break up spaces, because we need, you know, this to acknowledge what's going on and make sure that we're all safe and in this sort of new normal of an environment that we're in. So
I would challenge the audience, Charlie, to, you know, answer more than one question. Like, you know, we came at this with how to get rid of cubicle curtains and came up with 4 considerations. You know, if it is about creating subdivision of space, that's the problem. That's not the question. You know, the question is how to create a healthy environment. And then you begin to tip into the human need for shared daylight, the human need for privacy, the human need to have a clean, you know, or requirement to have a clean environment. So from there, you build that return on investment is more than just economic. It has a human quotient to it. And so, you know, it's for the audience, you know, get in front of your client, and someone's asking, what do you do if hospitals are full of cubicle curtains and they don't have a mindset of changing it? They need permission to think outside the box. That was, you know, when I threw that question out, I said, this is a crazy idea. They're never going to, they don't even know how often they replace them. So throw the crazy, the world's ready for crazy ideas right now. Throw the crazy question out there, but know that when you do, you've got answers that are substantiated with evidence. And so we're at least arming, we've done the work. You don't have to do the work. We not only have the answers to the questions and the evidence to prove it, but now we've got a product to stand behind you. And if in your innovative exploration, you see ways to, you know, redo those cubicle spaces that we haven't really tipped into yet, share them with us. You know, we're 95% there, and these little quantum leaps are a whole lot easier for us than for you to try to figure out how to customize it, you know, with a local vendor. We're, you know, so deep into this right now. It's a commitment, and, you know, just the practical thing to do.
I might add that in talking to a lot of the facility folks around the Midwest, and I've been at many of the top healthcare providers talking to them about this very thing, I think, you know, everyone realizes that you're not going to get rid of every cubicle curtain.
Yeah.
The idea is just to begin the process. Where you have an opportunity to do it, then you should be doing it. And I think Kaiser's white paper sort of proved that out, the economics of it that we proved out after 15 years and 20 years, it pays dividends. It's actually a lot cheaper to put a glass solution in than it is to have cubicle curtains. But that has to all come in the planning and design. So, you know, Roz is always pushing on you to kind of be creative and keep this in mind and think about it, because every time that, and you said that earlier, Debra, every time you go into a hospital, you know that the nurses don't necessarily want to touch those cubicle curtains. And if they're not interested in touching them, I mean, who really wants to? So I think it's time for change, and, you know, we've been pushing for it, and certainly this whole project has been about that. So hopefully we've helped, you know, demystify it. It's not that difficult. You know, we're doing things in bathroom doors now are glass in patient rooms. So, you know, and there's a lot of reasons why. We can leave the bottom clear, and you can see if a patient falls. Patient falls are a big issue. So there are many wins to applying this today, and hopefully people will start looking at it as a real solution more and more each day.
You know, that's a great point around the idea of privacy and dignity, because if you can have a situation where you can see into a door, even just halfway, that keeps a nurse or an aide from having to open the door and basically walk in on someone. So makes
So we actually have a
big
whole
difference.
set of tools to look at transparency and pattern density. I mean, it was more than just the aesthetic of pattern, but the versatility of pattern for a variety of settings. And so where you needed full visibility in an ICU is different than what you might need on a med-surg unit, which might be different than in an ambulatory setting or in an office or a staff lounge. You know, these are all places where, by virtue of our current planning, our rooms, you know, maybe that will evolve. I've got one project right now where we're creating these sort of flower petal modules and using glass for express care in an emergency room. You know, there's great opportunity once you introduce this product, but it's so versatile. And you know, aside, as we said, aside from visibility, it is about infection control. I mean, from a sensory point of view, we've added that in a laminated glass, the density of the glass deadens the sound, so you create an acoustical value that you wouldn't have otherwise. And then by virtue of pattern, we trigger those senses in the brain that trigger, you need to get well, we're happy, we're not in a threat state. And so we can exhale and prepare for a much better healing state. So it comes at so many different levels that if you need to be armed with that knowledge on how to have that conversation with your clients, we're here to share it either through a CEU or through I think we've shared, for those of you who did participate in the CEUs, with our list of resources. Read them, get smarter than us. We are happy to have you smarter.
Yeah, I mean, really, how many building materials can you have variable transmittance and variable reflectivity and change colors and, you know, make it a TV screen also every now and then. So it's just incredible amounts of things that you can do. I can't believe we're almost out of time today. I did want to take a second and just answer one of the questions that's on here, because I think it's a question that might be more something that I'm familiar with, but you guys.
Yeah, please do. Is that Peter Carey?
Yes, that's the
Yeah,
sand shortage
please
one.
that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, and that's true. There was a sand shortage for a while, but it was mainly caused because a lot of the sand was being moved over to being used for fracking. And as that has changed, new technologies have become available and the use of fracking has diminished a bit. The glass industry right now, architectural glass anyway, isn't really feeling that kind of a shortage at the moment. So it does ebb and flow, but right now it's looking much better than it had, let's say, 18 months ago. Okay, so since we're coming to the end of our time together, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to have participated, let's just take a few moments for our closing thoughts. And Roz, I'll start with you. I keep saying there's a slit in the vortex and the opportunity is now. And so as you begin to answer the hard questions that your clients are putting out there, I mean, I'm not sure we know the questions. We certainly don't know all the answers. But in gathering this information, we're part of an industry together, and we're here to do good. You can't come to health design without being empathetic. And so we hope you'll use us. We've put ourselves out here over the last 8 weeks to be part of a forum, and so get to us through Cama Inc. or at Cama Inc. Most of our social media connections, and Skyline Design, we're out there. We've got people wrapped around us to bring these questions together. We can come back. Deb can sort of be our Jimmy Kimmel here and bring us online from time to time. But I think we need each other right now, and our clients need us right now, not only to be clever and ingenious, but to be thoughtful and fact-based. We can be the Faucis of the glass world, I guess. So there you go. I wish you well. Thank you, Rod. And Charlie, your thoughts?
I would say that in closing that, right now, all of us are just hoping and praying that we can get through this whole crisis and see an upside and see, things change. And so because of that, we're all working in sort of a haphazard way because we can't really go out and see clients in the normal way that we would and present samples, et cetera. So we're having to be very creative in how we go to market and how we talk to people. We have to exercise an extreme amount of sensitivity, but we also have to be there for people. So all of our, we have a great national rep group. They're all super smart, super engaged people. They are constantly updated on what we're doing new. They have lots of interesting new tools. They're doing a lot of these little Zoom presentations, 1-on-1, 1-on-5, 1-on-10. We have two great sales managers that are out there supporting, answering all the technical questions that we need answered. We are working as a company. So we are manufacturing, doing a lot of work in healthcare, which is what we do quite a bit of. And so I would just say that you'll be getting more information as a follow-up to this and some of the other CEUs that will really talk more about Dignity Glass for doors, and camouflage, and all the products that we are offering for the healthcare environment. So you'll be seeing occasionally things in your mailbox over the next month that will hopefully help answer some of these questions. And certainly, all of our reps are on our website. So please feel free to contact any one of those when you can. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Charlie. And I'd just like to thank everybody for joining us today and just make mention of a few things. In the course of putting together our April issue for US Glass Magazine, we had to go through a number of different photos. And it became very apparent, spent my life doing this, but when you see it right in front of you, it kind of brings it home again. Nothing can do what glass does. Whether it was the 24-year-old showing her grandfather her engagement ring through glass, whether it was a family saying goodbye to their mother in a nursing home where the staff had moved the person up to glass. One of our staff members has a friend who nearly lost their life to COVID, and they actually wrote on their glass, "This window saved my life. It was the way I talked to you."
Yeah.
All these things are so unique to glass's ability to help us connect and be safe that I hope that in the future, you as healthcare design professionals and architects get to give people the experiences that they need at those very difficult points in their life. And if I can be helpful to you in any way, my email's easy. It's just Deb, D-E-B, @glass.com. So thank you all for being here. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you, Charlie, for the invitation, and I wish you a very good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.